We did get the final issue, X-Men 35, Uncanny X-Men 700, even though there's a legacy numbering for X-Men. I don't get it, but whatever. The Krakoan era has ended, and here to talk to me about that and the big finale and how they actually burned down Charles Xavier's dream and Charles Xavier the character is Jim from Weird Science.
Hello. Yeah, everything got burned down, burned to the ground.
And in this issue, we prove that if there were no humans, there would be no bigotry and no persecution and no fear, and they would be happily ever after, and there would be no reason for the X-Men. Yeah, if there are no humans, everything would be fine. Well, no shit, Sherlock. That's the struggle.
Yeah.
That's what they're talking about.
That the basic struggle is the idea of, hey, we're not fitting in. Can we fit in? And really, the actual struggle is, do we want to fit in? Do we want to go? And that's been Xavier's whole deal, is wanting to be accepted, but also accept everybody else. And that kind of seems like the point is missed here.
It almost feels like the super diversity is our strength crew here at Marvel Comics made a pro-segregation manifesto with their way out of Krakoa.
Yeah. And it's weird because by the end of this, it just ends up so weird to try to put the pieces back in the toy box, but then in a weird way that doesn't really make much sense of what happened and how it worked out. Instead of working out exactly what happened in their world, they're just basically saying, look, it would be great here, and everybody should join us, but yet it's weird because they don't.
Probably nothing more emblematic of all the failures of the Krakoan era than really the bastardization of Charles Xavier and his dream, which really plays out here. The final form of Charles Xavier, Professor X, at the end of Uncanny X-Men 700, X-Men 35. I guess the writers are Kieran Gillen, Al Ewing, and Jerry Duggan. I guess we shouldn't have expected more, even though the art, for the most part, is pretty good.
Yeah, the art is pretty good. There's, one thing that makes it kind of not great, but the idea of the writers, this is what they've been doing. And then at the end, it just is, not only did Xavier's dream get burned down, it seems like Hickman's did as well. And it's such a shame that they ended up wanting to prolong the whole story instead of moving forward that Hickman wanted, and he bailed because at the beginning it was exciting, everything was going, but everything got tainted. It's almost like a metaphor for the real deal, a meta thing of how they burned it down with their just bad writing.
So getting into the comic book itself, the really weird thing is now Charles Xavier is absolutely the bad guy and Magneto is the good guy. Magneto, the mutant supremacist, the man that went out there and murdered hundreds of thousands of people, even murdered his own child in the name of mutant supremacy, is now the good guy on the right side of history. And we've taken Charles Xavier, the man that realized they had to overcome these obstacles, but it was for a worthy cause, because in the end, we're all going to live side by side equally. He's the bad guy that's now murdering people. And we got the juxtaposition basically from I think it's X2, where you have Magneto in the cell. Actually, I guess it's at the end of X-Men where Magneto's in the cell and Charles comes up and talks to him about where he went wrong. Now we have Magneto delivering that speech to Charles Xavier, and it made me sick to my stomach, not to mention the art by Phil Noto, which stands out as very not good in this book.
Yeah, that's what I was alluding to. But yeah, when you get that, it's very X2. And I guess it's supposed to be clever, and it's supposed to be that deal of, oh my God, look, Xavier was the wrong one. But like you said, that's not what any X-Men, I think, would want. And also it just ends up reminding me just how wrong things went towards this end, where at the end you don't even get a redemption or anything like that, where Xavier's just like, hey, listen, I was the villain, and you end up having Magneto say what you would think would normally be Xavier talking to Magneto in that. And it just ended up, all of this felt just off. It felt off. It felt like at the end, when you're going to have an end and you want a satisfying end where people are like, oh my God, I'm so glad this is something that happened. I wish that can continue. At that point, I was like, oh, thank God this is ending. And just let's move on. Let's move on from this.
And I think it's one of the big things that really went awry or astray during Krakoa is that the writers themselves didn't believe in the hero. They didn't believe in what Charles Xavier wanted. They believed in what Magneto wanted. They sided with the villain, and ultimately the villain ends up coming out as the good guy in this because they don't understand the core concepts of heroism itself. And that's why they ended up siding with the villain. And I guess in the end, we got the version of X-Men that they wish had started from the very beginning. Those core concepts, they wanted them to be turned around to where mutant supremacy should have been the ultimate goal of the X-Men all along. And now I guess that's what's going to be under Magneto. And of course, they've got to make Charles just a really terrible guy one last time before they put him in the box, you know, in that prison or whatever forever. Mm-hmm. And so they put like a mind controlling device on him to where he can't use his telepathic abilities and all that stuff. But apparently they put a loophole in there. So this dude is going to perform some type of hate crime or something on a mutant that says, you know, a Krakoa is for suckers, whatever. And he literally has this dude walk up to a building. And from everything I can tell, he had him commit suicide.
Yeah. And it's not just these X books. It is a problem with all of comics right now, at least the big two, is these writers don't want to write anything heroic. They don't want to write the heroes as heroic. They think that that's the twist that's going to get everybody. Look, I'm so smart that I'm actually showing you why a hero is bad instead of actually showing why these heroes are heroes. And so at the end, all this said and done and everything, they put Xavier away and they talk about that loophole. And when you end up, it's okay. You've actually almost redeemed him a little bit where he stops this guy from, you know, stabbing this mutant with a Krakoa's for lovers shirt. And then it ends where, why would he make him commit that? Why would he end up making him just look like he jumped off a building? Like that you went too far. You went too far again. And that's what they've been doing this whole time, especially with Xavier. They went too far. And I don't understand that they couldn't even end with that. You know, why can't you just end them stopping this and be with it? They have to go that far to be shocking. I don't know. And is
because
it supposed to be
Xavier's dream to them was evil, living side by side equally and trying to work with humans in concert with them and understanding that not everyone was going to accept them, but that was going to be worth it. You know, in the end, was an evil idea to them. So they have to show Professor X as being the most evil mutant ever, even more evil than Magneto.
Yeah, and I get the idea that Xavier's tried and tried and tried, and he keeps telling Magneto it'll work, and we could be, you know, as one and equal and things like that. But in the end, it doesn't make it better where it seems like Xavier's like, screw it. Let's just, you know, I'm going to go for it. I'm going to be evil. Like, you almost want at the end for him to just say, okay, I tried this. It could have worked, but the things that got in the way weren't exactly just work it out a better way instead of making Magneto the hero, pretty much like you said, or at least what they want the hero to be. And then Xavier, it's just like that actually is like a donkey punch at the end to anybody who thought we were going to get any sort of redemption. It makes it even worse. Like, it's the worst part of this whole deal, that last little section. And it sucks.
It absolutely does suck. It was not very good, but the rest of the book isn't very good either. There's one highlight in it, but they even ruin that. But the idea, I guess, the basic concept is that Krakoa will go on forever because the Pacific Krakoans that went lost went up in some pocket dimension that lasted 15 years of evolution without humans. And guess what? There's no crime. Nobody hates mutants when it's only mutants. Like I said, it's almost like a pro-segregation manifesto on how their civilization would occur and grow and all this stuff if they're away from all those bigots, all those stupid humans or whatever. And they come back, they open the doors, everyone gets to say goodbye to their human loved ones, because remember, all the mutants are basically offspring of humans to begin with. And it's this utopia, it's perfection. And the way they end this, because we can't have Krakoa end on a down note to where it failed, it actually goes on forever and it's absolutely perfect. Why would any of the mutants, why would any of them X-Men want to stay on the 616? Why would they want to stay on this Earth and have to go through these trials and tribulations if you've got this other place that's essentially utopia and they could go there and live there forever and never be persecuted again? It actually ends up making the story stupid.
Maybe a Wolverine would say, like, yeah, that sounds fun. I don't know. But there'd only be like 3. These people, you couldn't stop them from jumping on. Remember the idea when they had Krakoa at the beginning of this, everybody wanted to get to the island, and that was just starting out. To actually be told now that there's a pocket dimension where it worked and it's great, and there's no way that they'd all run there. They'd all be, pushing people aside to get there. They'd be like me, just, knocking people over, running over people to get there. And they're just like, oh, we're not going to go there. But why? And they don't give a reason. That's the big thing. When they get to the end and they say, oh, anybody who wants to come here, I would have liked to have heard a couple of the characters, oh, no, I want to stay for this, or I got to do this. But it's really just thrown out there just to get rid of a bunch of mutants. Then you have the core deal. But why would they stay? I don't know.
It makes no sense. They could have built it in there to where, hey, this is the gateway to Valhalla for mutants. This is, the promised land or whatever. We need some people to stay on the other side of the gate to protect it and to make sure no one goes through and ruins what we built.
Exactly.
Okay, now you have a reason to have 100 mutants stay behind and basically guard the gates. But they never thought about that because the writers themselves are dumbasses.
Yeah, it's a wave of the hand. It just didn't, for me, seem like it's setting up any cool stories in the future. It's just, hey, we're going to end this. We're going to show you how awful it was. We're going to be more awful. Boom, done. And it just left me kind of shrug and say, thank God, sayonara, sucker. I'm done. I don't need this anymore, which maybe that's their mission accomplished. I don't know, but it was a weird way.
In the end, this doesn't say anything about X-Men for the past 60 years. This doesn't even say anything about the Krakoan era. You've removed everything that makes X-Men special. You removed all their stakes. You removed everything that they have to overcome to finish it off on this really stupid high note or whatever. I guess they consider it that. And it basically just takes a dump on the entire premise of the series.
That's actually the meta thing I got, was the idea of all you haters, don't you realize Krakoa, it was awesome. And if you weren't involved, man, it'd be great. Like, we're the people that the deal. And at the end, I'm like, no, it sucked. And it really started out great. It ended up losing its way. And now you're just ending it without even a statement really in my mind, except that it could have worked. Well, it didn't. And you're the reason why it didn't. So don't tell me that it could have worked. It just kind of got me mad at the end.
No, I was very frustrated. There's one good thing about this comic book. Chris Claremont's story sucks. You've got Nightcrawler calling Mystique dad and stuff. It's embarrassing. The one good moment, Apocalypse shows up and he says, hey, that's the evolution of mutants. He says they're weak, they're pacifists. This is nothing I would have ever stood for. I'm the first, and I won't stand for it now. I'm going to fix all this stuff that's happening. Mm-hmm. And he starts mowing them down, the new mutants from New Krakoa, the old mutants and all that stuff. And it was awesome just seeing him wreck house for about, 8 pages.
I don't think that we're supposed to be rooting for Apocalypse. I am. I actually was like, this is cool. And I thought, this is the statement of, okay, you pacifist jerks, you go to your stupid thing. I'm wrecking house and I'm going to make it what it's supposed to be. And I'm going to go and do this, that. And then at the end, it just thuds because of what he realizes. And then he ends up, pretty much being neutered.
But he's the only character in the entire book that acts like himself. And I think that's why it's the only moment that even makes sense for the entire book.
And he is just ripping house, and it's great. And he is telling them it as it is. It felt like almost like you said, this is the one mutant that's actually acting right and telling everybody you're a bunch of bull crap. And so he starts going until he sees the future that, oh, they didn't need me. Well, back to Morocco I go. And he just Charlie Brown walks away. And I'm like, no, just go down like you're going down here. Just wreck house. And at that point, I thought everybody was just going to be like, holy crap, we better get through that portal, get out of here. But he wants to kind of lead the whole deal. But when he sees that he's not the reason, or his philosophy was used, but they don't need him anymore, then it's done. He gets depressed and he goes away.
That part is when he stopped acting like himself. He was no longer Apocalypse because he saw the beauty of what Krakoa could have been. And even Apocalypse, the man that wants mutants to be as strong as anything in the history of the world, that believes in the evolution of mutants and the survival of the fittest, was like, nope, I guess I wasn't needed all along. So I'm going to take my ball and go home, even though he's literally been destroying everybody. They couldn't stop him. They ripped his eyeballs out, which is something Nightcrawler would never do. He would never just start dismembering somebody. But he does it in this comic book because nobody is themselves. And in the end, not even Apocalypse was. He's like, nope, I'm going to go home to Morocco. They're like, what you doing here, Big A? Why are you back on Morocco?
I was going to say,
he didn't need me.
All of a sudden he showed up and I'm like, Apocalypse is back at the end. Nope, it's just A. A is gone back to Morocco again. And like you said about Nightcrawler, it's not even the idea, because I get the idea of progressing characters or changing them a little. Like, okay, people do change a bit. But the idea of how they had made them not be themselves, like Nightcrawler ripping eyes out, that just shows you how far away they have gotten, and still by the end could not realize or wouldn't want to realize that they hadn't done things right, and not even right, but well and good, and what people would like. No Nightcrawler, fan, I think, would want to see him ripping the eyes out of Apocalypse. Yeah, you might want to see him do some bamps and take him down or help take him down, but you went too far. You went that too far to be edgy or something. I don't get it. I don't get why they did it.
Yeah, so they basically neutered their only good moment here, where they ripped the balls right off of Apocalypse because of the fucking Care Bear stare moment.
And I thought that was like one of the things, this will be interesting going forward. And then they pull it back. And you have, some other crazy things. Doom shows up and he's grabbing a seed, like weird stuff that obviously might end up being something. But that even felt so out of place. Like none of this felt right.
There's a bunch of stupid wrap up where you have... Mr. Sinister go up to Mother Righteous, and it turns out it's Mystique, and of course she murders somebody out the way.
Revenge,
even though she's the big fucking hero. We just had a big X-Men wedding special celebrating her and Destiny because they're true love and they're heroes forever now, even though she's still murdering people.
See, why in this? Why in what should end up being, they claim issue 700, it's the end of this era. Make it more a celebration and actually show, they didn't want to admit that anything they did was wrong. So they double down here, and it's murderous nonsense again. And that felt weird at a point where, maybe you could have just said, okay, this was a bit of a mistake. It could have been good with that other dimension, and let's get on with it. They had to keep pushing this idea of murder and mayhem, and it just didn't feel right at all.
There is a brief bit here at the end where they do introduce the concepts of the new titles, and we get introduced to the new base of the X-Men team from Jed McKay, and the new relationship between Rogue and Gambit in New Orleans for Uncanny X-Men and Exceptional X-Men, and NYX and Storm, who's apparently going to be with the United Nations,
UN,
and Dazzler. Yeah. Did any of these get you excited for this X-Men from the Ashes?
That's what I was going to ask you. No, it didn't. I actually liked the cool base. I'm like, hey, that looks kind of cool. But that's just, an aesthetic deal. And, I like seeing Gambit there. He's getting drunk. None of this did. I just read this and I thought, oh God. And when I got to the part with Storm at the UN and then Dazzler, I'm like, this is what is supposed to be exciting us for, and not just a new book, but a new era. And it didn't really get me going. And most of it, I'll have to admit, was because of how turned off I was from everything else in that issue. They are not, it's like the idea of a TV show, the lead in and the run into a show. You have that. And this wasn't it. By the end, I was just like, oh, this is crap. I'm looking forward to the new books just because I look forward to any new book, but my confidence is not, peaked, or my interest isn't even peaked by the end of this with this little preview stuff at all.
You would have thought they would have come up with an idea or a core concept that was going to define what X-Men from the Ashes was, and introduce it here to get you interested in something. But they don't do that. It's just a couple of scenes from every single book that you're not interested in that really explains nothing or sells you on the idea that you should be all in for X-Men from the Ashes, that you should be going to your comic book shop and putting these on your pull list, that this is something you should be excited about. It was like, cool, you put a bunch of little panels without very good art for the most part.
Yeah, that's a problem. And like you said, it's just like a preview deal. Instead of give the elevator pitch of why people who just ended up getting out of the Krakoa era loved it or hated it, why they would want to have this new, from the Ashes and what it means and what it will go forward to. But instead, it read like, there's only a couple pages even. It's not even like a free comic book day deal. They should have had, like you said, the MO of everything of what's going to come up. But yeah, it didn't get me that excited, but I'll be looking and checking out all the books. But again, some of the announcements didn't excite me either. So I needed something to really show me, all right, I'll be interested in the NYX or, that exceptional deal. And this was just little like blurb things, just a couple panels.
Of all the announcements, the only stuff that got me quote unquote excited, and that's overselling my response to almost all of this, were the things that they didn't need to sell. You didn't really need to sell me on the flagship X-Men book. You don't really need to hard sell me on Uncanny X-Men, even though I do think Gail Simone is an enormous red flag. You don't really need to sell me on a Wolverine book. You got to sell me on all the other crap, and they have not done that whatsoever. It looks like 3 titles and a bunch of miniseries that will all be done within a year.
I don't think they realize just how much people are annoyed and upset and disgusted by how they ended this whole thing. And I'm not just talking this issue, I'm talking in general. And I think that that's a misplay. I think that this should have been a olive branch out to readers that might want to know that things are going to be different.
In the end, I guess we got not what Jonathan Hickman wanted, not what X-Men fans wanted. I don't think what we got what Marvel wanted, but we did get what Jordan White and the Legion of Doofuses wanted. Magneto is the good guy. Charles Xavier's the bad guy. He's evil. He'll never be seen again. Krakoa was the perfect idea of all time. Segregation is good. That's going to roll off in a pocket universe where they're all going to be living happily ever after. We'll never see that stuff again. And we just got a shitty end of this where they couldn't even admit that it didn't work. They couldn't even put a bow on it. It's got to go on forever because there are 12 morons on Twitter that thought this was a good idea, even though they didn't actually buy the books. And I thought this was a really shitty way to end the Krakoan era. Certainly better than Rise the Powers of 10 and Fall of the House of X, because I don't think you can get worse than that shit. But it wasn't very good.
I am hoping that the change, Tom Brevoort, but I'm not confident, but I'm still hoping that the next round will be better, or at least start good, like the whole Krakoa era did start out very well, but just kind of fell and crashed and burned.
The $10 cover price of this comic book and the terrible Nightcrawler story from Chris Claremont and the equally bad sizzle reel on the end for the new From the Ashes books, along with the story, make me not bullish on recommending this book. In fact, I don't recommend it at all. I would give it maybe a 1.5 out of 5, 3 out of 10. They didn't do anything justice. They didn't do X-Men fans any justice. They didn't do Jonathan Hickman any justice. And they certainly didn't do their own universe, putting a bow on this, moving forward, any justice either. What's your score, Jim? You're a professional critic. Put your balls on the line.
My score for this would probably be a 5.5 out of 10. I did like the art. The stuff with the whole Apocalypse deal until he kind of walked away. It would have been better if he would have actually went down swinging, but about a 5.5 out of 10.
You are far too generous, man, but
the art
the
plays a big part of it. But again, I usually don't factor in the price. If I do actually do that, I might even go down to a 4.5, maybe take a deal, but I'm 5.5.
$10 is a steep price to pay for a bunch of crap,
steep. I agree.
Which is what this ended up being. If you do enjoy the verbal stylings of Jim and I, we do have an exclusive podcast over on Patreon, the Hot or Not Comic Rundown Podcast. We do it every single Thursday. Jim and I run down all the new books from Marvel, DC, indie comic books. We have a good time with that one. And Jim's got the worst opinions of comic books, I guarantee it.
That's what you say.